Welcome again. Welcome, listeners. You are back on She Exclusive, and this is the podcast called The She Mind. And The She Mind is a podcast that focuses on women empowerment. We have real women, real issues, real talk, and real solutions. And this is where we focus on business, anything with entrepreneurism, professional, CEO, growth, as well as health, and as well as self and community. Today, I am so lucky and honored to be across from, albeit worlds apart. I am in Spain, and Kanisha is in the US, but we have connected via an international speakers connection, and we really vibed. And I'm so lucky to have her and welcome her onto our podcast today. Today, we are going to talk about everything, sort of your internal emotions and leadership. But before we launch into that, I just want to hand over to Kanisha, excuse me. We've both been laughing about the intricacy of the pronunciation of both of our names. Tirza, Kanisha, not easy, but as Kanisha says, it makes us unique and beautiful. So we revel in the beauty that is the uniqueness of our individuality. But over to you. Tell us a little bit about you. I just want to say how impressed I was with your aura, with your professionalism, with all you brought to the space of empowerment in business. Tell us a little about you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be on the podcast and talking with you all today. And I really, before I even dive in, I love your She Exclusive. I love the community that you're building, right? Because it's so important that people like-minded and alike have a space where they feel comfortable sharing. And we all have commonalities as human beings. But to have a space for women to be able to talk about entrepreneurship and professionalism and empowerment and growing in a space that they feel comfortable with, we all find our tribe. And so it's great that you're providing one. So thank you for allowing me. Yeah, thanks for allowing me.
I'm honored that you feel attracted to it and you want to be part of it. So thank you.
Yeah. So a little bit about me. I am a podcast host as well. And so 2 podcast hosts having a good conversation is going to be a good day. My podcast is called Coach Up, and I talk with coaches and I interview 6 and 7 figure earning coaches about how they built their business to that level. Because Tirza, there's so many coaches in the world who have so much to offer, but 2 things really stand out about coaching. One, that a large majority of coaches know how to coach and have a conversation, but they don't know how to build a successful coaching business, right? You may get certified as a coach to learn how to coach if you haven't done that before, but they don't often teach you how to build a business. So my podcast is for struggling new coaches, or even coaches who are doing okay, but they want to build. How do they build to 6 and 7 figures in their business? So the strategies and the secrets from those who've already done it, that's what I get to talk about on the Coach Up podcast with those who've done it. And then I also speak on what we are talking about and connected on, because this is close to your heart, right? Like that empowerment. How do you forge through fear? So my platform is Forging Through Fear, because there are things that we label. I say we mislabel them. Tirza, people may get mad at me about this, but I say we mislabel them as anxiety and imposter syndrome and worry and doubt. And while those titles are accurate, right, like they accurately describe the differences, it's all fear-based, right? And so we're scared of something. And so I talk about and I speak on to conferences and to workshops and lunch and learns and any and every crowd of how do we forge through that? And that's what we're going to talk about today. And so I live in the US, as you mentioned, and absolutely enjoy the opportunity to connect with amazing people and hopefully be able to be a light in the world.
Amazing. Well, thank you. Thank you for giving us your time. I'm going to just immediately jump into what you said about the labels. So tell me a little bit more about that, because I am one for getting rid of any and all labels. I hate them. And I think that they put us in a box and they make us confined to an understanding of what that is, when actually there's so much complexities into why we feel things, why we act certain ways, and we only just label it because that's what we know. And it goes back to our subconscious mind, doesn't it? And our I don't know, early education as to what we've been told as to, oh, you're an angry person, that's why you do this, or you're an autistic person and that's why you act like that, or you're a self-sabotaging person and that's why you've never achieved that. So if we can strip labels more and more, I am all about it. So tell me what you're thinking about that.
I like how you put that, because it makes me think about labels are limiting. I am an alliteration person. I love stuff that starts with the same letters. But labels are so limiting because, like you said, we have labels and it puts us in a box that then we think either, okay, well, this is just who I am. And so then we start to formulate our identity around that when it doesn't have to be that way.
That's right.
And we are choosing to ignore all the other possibilities of the future that we could have by not adhering to that label, right? There are parts of us. We are, as you said, we're complex individuals. And so when I say mislabeling things, I'll just use procrastination as an example.
Okay. Wonderful. I love that, because I think procrastination is such a poorly used label.
Right? And then so we think about, and you may have a different definition, but when I think about procrastination, I just simply think, okay, at the very basis, it's putting off what needs to be done now for later. Okay, but that's the very basic of it. The important question is to ask, why is it happening? Right? As is the important question for just about everything that we do.
Yeah.
And so why am I putting off later? Potentially later, right? Because if I'm not doing it now, there's no guarantee I'm going to do it later. Why am I putting that off instead of doing it now? What is stopping me? And often we'll say things like, oh, time. No, that's a lie, because we make time for what we want, what's important. Or it's, I don't know how. That could be true, yet we live in the information age. So you can either get the information or you can find somebody who has it. And if you don't find the person, it's because you're too scared to reach out, I may have to say. Or it could be that maybe you don't think you deserve to do that. I'll give you a good example. I am, Tirza, I'm the worst when it comes to taking vacations, because I think I need to be at a certain goal level. This is my A-type personality, I guess, if that's the right way to say it, where I say I've set these goals. When I get these goals, my reward is vacation. But if I haven't gotten to that goal, I'm like, oh, I don't deserve a vacation. I recognize on one side of my head that doesn't make sense. But the other side of my high achieving sense says, absolutely, you don't deserve it until then. But why is that the case? Am I not working? Am I not putting forth my best effort? Do we not need rest? Do I have a fear that if I decide to spend this money, that I'm taking it away from something else, investing in my business? There's so many things that go into it. And so that question of why leads to what's really underneath the reason that something has been put off. And when we get down to that, then we can start actually tackling it to move through it so that that procrastination goes away and we start to plan what we're supposed to do.
That's right. And if we look at the neuroscience, what scientists are telling us is actually procrastination isn't even a thing. It's lack of self-efficacy and it's lack of intrinsic motivation. And that comes down to the chemical cocktails in the brain. If you have a certain level of dopamine or estrogen or serotonin or epinephrine or all the other things that actually surge you onto doing something, which then evokes intrinsic motivation, then you do it. And once you then go and make the step forward, then you realize in your neocortex that actually you can, and self-efficacy rises. So therefore, you feel empowered to want to go again and try more. And that leads us really nicely and segues us into the topic, which is today, which is all about fear. What stops us from doing something? Is it self-efficacy? Is it procrastination? Is it, negative or depreciating thoughts? What is it that makes this fear? And we label it into these boxes, which is, oh, you're a procrastinator, or you're low self-esteem, et cetera, et cetera. We can be whatever we want to be. And we can tell ourselves, we can teach our brains to inform, we can teach our subconscious mind to inform our cognitive mind what our personalities can be. And that will, step by step, eradicate our fear. But what is it that you think about why people have this fear? And Tell me more about what you talk about.
Yeah, I think people have this fear. One of the primary reasons, and so I'd be delighted to hear your thoughts, is because we have been put into the box of what we can and cannot be, what we can and cannot do, and we buy into it. And we've not, and this may sound harsh, I have been guilty of this and still have some of it of myself that I need to work on. But we don't take time, Tirza, to sit and think for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We have listened to what whoever we grew up with, whether it's parents, grandparents, friends, whoever, who told us what we could and could not do, what we could and could not be, hence labels. We get into either school, or we get into a job, or we get into a relationship, or all of the three. And we hear people say, oh, you can do this, or this is an available avenue for you. And then we buy into it because we don't know any better. We haven't been taught, like you just said, right? We can teach our subconscious to inform our conscious. We have been now taught this is what's available, this beautiful little box with these little labels. And we haven't been taught you can choose.
That's right.
We haven't been exposed to that. And that is what, when you know something, it is comfortable. When you don't know something, that's where fear comes in. It's the uncertainty. And so uncertainty creates that I'm afraid of what may be because I don't know it. And it's okay not knowing, but we're not often taught that it's okay to not know and then to move through it. So I'm curious what you think. What do you think informs that?
I think I totally agree with you. And I think it's so empowering that people need to know about this. And if we go back into some of the research and what people are, neuroscientists, et cetera, are telling us, the brain works in what's called the space of possibility. So the brain does not actually want to go into something it doesn't know. And yet the only way it learns is when we tap into things that we don't know. So there's a huge war going on in our own mind. And we are born quite lazy as a species. We want the easy route. We want something that's comfortable. So actually it's really easy for someone to believe what they're told. Like, oh, this is your lot in life. This is where you live, This is where you live. And it's easy to stay there. But if we're longing for something else, if something within us is telling us we can be more, or something that's telling us we're not happy where we're at, whether it's breaking a trauma bond or getting out of a relationship that we're not happy with, or moving up in our career progression, or getting that next job, whatever it might be, we have to invite our brain to welcome in the space of possibility. And that's where affirmations, new self-talk, etc. comes in, because you have to inform the neural pathway that's already created that there's a new possibility, that there's something else that could happen. It has to be close enough to what it already knows. It can't be overly abstract. Like if you told me now, oh, tomorrow you could be a neurosurgeon, I'd be like, that's not going to happen.
Right.
But if you told me that I could lecture to a bunch of professors on my theory, then I'd think, okay, that's possible. And then I can start to teach myself the confidence, and my mind the confidence that I can get there. So if we're willing to move into the space of possibility, then we can start to eliminate the fear. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. And I think in order for us to sometimes know the possibility, there has to be exposure.
Yes, that's a huge one.
Right? Because we can sometimes imagine what an alternative life would be, an alternative route would be. And I like that you said it. Our new possibility has to be just off of what we already know in order for our brain to accept it. Because our brains are going to say, no, I reject that. I don't know that.
Because it wants to know what it's understanding. It needs to figure it out.
Absolutely. And so we have to give it the time to do that. But if it's not within our realm to be able to even imagine, what exposure will give us what we can't imagine. And so that's why I say, we're in 2024. We're having this conversation in December 2024. Most of the world has access to, not all, but most of the world has access to the internet. And you have access to a library. I know those may be forgotten, but they still exist, right?
All encyclopedias on the wall that used to be.
I love it. Or we have access to television, and you can say, okay, this is where I am, but this is where I want to be. And if you go searching for that, something's going to pop up that you didn't know. Something's going to pop up that is different from what you've been exposed to. And then you can say, oh, if that person can do that, I can do that too.
Right.
Because we're all the same, right? We all have hearts, praise God, lungs. We have internal organs that are working. Some of the essential organs that are required for all of us to be living, we all have. So if one person can do it, the other one can. And so that exposure is what allows us to imagine differently. And then to say, okay, now that I can see there is a difference, okay, now I'm not as afraid. Still some work to do to get through the fear, but I can now imagine a different way. Yes. And then that goes to preparation, but that's a next step. So
100%, 100%. And I think being open and willing to be taught, informed, gain new information is a skill that's, I'm going to argue that the world is losing a little bit, because we all feel ourselves experts, especially behind these. Yeah. You know, we talk behind these, we say that we're experts, but actually being a reflective individual and opening yourself to new information is a skill that we need to not forget, because that's what enables us to be that bit better and to understand what the possibility could be, right? Yes. Yeah. And learning is just so vital, and it comes with humility and respect and an acceptance of somebody else's mind. If we go back to 1600s, where Descartes, the theorist who talked about the theory of mind, and it's big in sort of people who have been a teacher like me, where we look at children's development and we understand how the young child goes from being an egocentric into understanding that there's other people in his world. Oh, and that those other people think thoughts, and they might be different from my thoughts. And, oh, I have a thought, and that makes me who I am because I've had these experiences, but his thoughts are different. The way he makes a sandcastle is different to the way I'm making a sandcastle. It doesn't make it wrong. It's just different. And this is Descartes' theory of mind. And I think in today's day and age, we're forgetting that. And we're becoming so driven to following what everyone else is doing, or sticking with a crowd, or sticking with a concept. But actually, we're limiting our possibilities to think beyond what we know. Yeah.
Yeah. It goes back to, we have to take time to think. We have to spend time away from the phone, away from the gadget, away from other people, away from
what else we could be, and maybe be visionary and go into the depths of our imagination and be creative again. I mean, our brains are born to be creative. We are creative beings.
Correct.
Yeah.
If we ask the question, I encourage all of you guys listening, ask the question, if I knew I couldn't fail, what would I do? If you knew you could not fail, what would you do? What would be the possibilities? I mean, we wouldn't have people who are going to the moon with civilians.
That's right.
If somebody didn't say, oh, that's possible.
That's right. We wouldn't have farms, and we wouldn't have houses if somebody in our history didn't say, what would it be? What would be the worst consequence if we failed? Because we were hunter-gatherers, right? We started off making tents and going around the globe. And somebody said, oh, actually, we don't have to chase the food. We can plant it. And they had to actually think to themselves, well, what if it fails and we die? And then it worked, and we got crops. It's exactly the same today. It's so powerful to remember that.
Yeah. Then the next thing I would say is plan, prepare. And so what you were talking about, I like the example that you gave. So instead of being egocentric, realizing that other people have thoughts, and their thoughts are different from mine, and learning requires humility. It also requires intentionality. And so when I say prepare, we prepare to learn, prepare to investigate, prepare to get exposure. And it all takes planning and intentionality. Meaning, at the very basis, look at your calendar. So if I look at my calendar, I know that every morning, whether I get to it or not, most of the time I'm pretty good, but I have 30 minutes every morning on my calendar before I quote unquote start work where I'm doing a training. I have intentionally set time to learn something about the trade and the craft that I do as part of my work, because I recognize that there are other people who have information. There are other people who think differently than I think, that when I expose myself to them, either they're teaching me something new, or Tirza, they're reaffirming something I either know
or doing wrong.
Yes, exactly. And we need that reaffirmation. We need that affirmation in order to continue to go back to what you were talking about earlier, have that intrinsic motivation, right? Because the intrinsic motivation comes from the inside, right? We hear something, but it connects or it clicks and affirms something that we already know inside of us to continue that motivation. If we never continue to feed ourselves that information, then that's where fear comes in. When you continually feed yourself and say, okay, I can do this. Okay, I know this. Okay, I'm comfortable and confident in this, we move forward. It's when we question ourselves that fear will set in and say, oh, I don't know, I'm not comfortable. I'm maybe, and maybes cause us to procrastinate and cause us to be paralyzed and cause us not to take action. And so prepare. When I say prepare, put time on your calendar. Set a time. It doesn't have to be every day. It could be every 3 days. It could be once a week. But that you're intentionally setting time to learn or expose yourself to the ideas or to new ideas, possibilities that are going to help to eliminate and eradicate that fear, because you're getting something new and you're building your confidence with, oh, okay, I've learned something new. And now I have a new possibility. I'm teaching my subconscious mind to inform my conscious mind. So this is how we're going to do things.
That is such an empowering takeaway. Listeners, take this away with you. That is so empowering. Every day or every other day, put it in your diary. It's intentional learning to inform your brain, to understand something new, to reaffirm what you're already doing, or to sharpen the sword of what you already have, because there's going to be something you'll gain from that learning. And as a teacher or an educator, and then for years as a consultant for the government, etc., I had to be informed. Like, you can't stand in front of a bunch of people and not know what you're talking about, right? And I'm so empowered by learning. And I think that it's the best thing you can do. It hones your skill. It sharpens your sword. It makes you so at the top of your game. But even more than that, I want to pick up on what you're saying. It's about opening the space of possibility for greater growth. And that's where you really become more mature, more humble, more reflective, and far more successful. Because the biggest downside of, I'm going to have a moment because I can't recall the author, but there's the quadrant of learning. I think it's, there's a really kind of controversial term where it's called, where it's the conscious incompetence, and then there's the competence.
Conscious, unconscious.
Unconscious competence, conscious competence.
Unconsciously competent.
That's
consciously incompetent.
That's it. And you have this quadrant, but the problem is many people who, when they get to the stage of conscious competence, they feel they've made it. And then what happens is we stay stuck in what we know.
Yes.
Right? And then we don't move forward. And then we think that we're the bee's knees and we think that we're at the top of our game, but everyone else is moving faster than us. So scheduling time in to learn something new and make your conscious competence go back into unconscious incompetence and then conscious incompetence, so that you know what you don't know. And then you start to take time to learn it. It's empowering. It's empowering, and it removes the fear, right? Because fear only comes when you don't know something. And that's procrastination often too. Procrastination actually isn't a thing. It's often because you don't know it. So your self-efficacy is low. Therefore, your intrinsic motivation is nil. And therefore, you're not going to go forward.
Yes. Okay. So I have a question for you before I ask it. you made me think of two things. One, we want to get into the unconsciously competent square, which is that one where, because you've learned stuff so well, it's habitual. It's now subconscious, and you do it because it's
like driving or cooking or whatever. Yeah,
absolutely. That's where you want to get some skills to, and then you want to go exactly back to unconsciously incompetent, where you just don't even know what you don't know, but you know you need to know something. And so that was excellent. And you made me think about when I used to be in corporate, Tirza, I had these 3 C's that I would I would coach my team through. And it was competency, consistency, competency, and then confidence. So you do something right, okay, because we can practice wrong and then do it wrong. But you do something right over and over and over and over again until you get competent at it. And then when you're competent at it, you continue that consistency and it builds confidence. And then, like you said, the fear goes away, because when you know something, you know that you know that you know, then there is no fear. I'm going to go into this, I'm going to nail it, I'm going to ace it. And it's a completely different energy and a way that you step into a space. And that's where we all want to be in our lives. But it's a continual process. My question for you, as a teacher, former teacher, and with the knowledge that you have now, so as we learn stuff, Tirza, how do we retain it? Because that's a big problem, I think, now for the information overload that we have now. We have so much information. We hear stuff, we read stuff, we intake it, but how do we actually retain it so that we're actually learning it?
Play.
Did you say play?
Yeah. Using it. If you choose that you want to retain it, you have to use it. It's the same with any education level. So my biggest sort of lecture for any teacher is, if you want the kid to understand it first and then become competent in it and then truly learn it into your long-term memory. So we have working memory, then we have long-term memory, right? So our external environment gives us information all the time. It goes into our working memory and it can stay there for as long as we need it. And this is why people who take exams and ace them and then 3 months later can never remember what they took the test on, is because they never actually played with that concept. They never used it. They just were taught it. And they went through the process of what I believe now is really redundant education. Education system is very broken. It teaches facts. It doesn't actually inform the brain. If you want to learn it, you have to play through it. You have to actually make mistakes. You have to make a complete F up of the situation sometimes. And then you have to learn how to fix it. And then you have to problem solve through it. So in my opinion, as an entrepreneur or as a business person, with all the noise and information that there is to learn, first, like you said, plan your day to learn something, but choose what you're going to learn, because your brain needs to feel that there's relevance. It has to be meaningful. Because you're going to want to do something with that learning. If you just spend 30 minutes every day learning something and then you go on to do something completely different, it's almost a waste of time. It has to match what you're doing in your life, and it has to enhance your goals. It has to build on your vision, right? It needs to fulfill what it is you're trying to do. If I spent every morning learning about being a mechanic and then went on to supporting coaching or life development, it would be a waste of my time, right? So I'm going to learn something that's relevant to my life and to my day, and then I'm going to play through it. Just remember the word play. And it sounds trivial, and we think play happens when you're 6 or under, but we all play through things. When you open up a new, like just yesterday, I started to learn how to make a click funnel. So I'm having to do it, and then it's not right, so I delete it, and then I start again, and then I put the wrong picture, and then I have to delete that one. This is play. It's playing through learning.
Yeah.
Soon I will master it. And then before you know it, maybe I can lecture on it. And this is the growth of self-efficacy. And this is where you eradicate fear around stuff. But you have to be willing to play. And it's a humbling space to be in.
But that word completely changes the perspective of how we eradicate that fear, forge through that fear, and how we learn.
Yeah.
When you said play, I thought, did she said play. Whereas, we talk in our business terms and our entrepreneurial or our professional terms,
yes.
Right, of taking action, and you must take action on what you learn. But play gives you freedom, Tirza, which is why I like that word, to mess up. Like you were just talking about, right? Like you do stuff and then you mess it up. And so then you got to fix it. But when you talk about it from a standpoint, a perspective of, okay, I'm playing in this, then to mess up a few times seems harmless. It seems like it's almost expected, right? We're expected to go out and get dirty when we play. Right? If you didn't, did you really play? Right?
Exactly.
But if you look at it on the opposite side and say, okay, I learned this and I'm going to put it into action. There's this militaristic is what comes to mind. Just discipline, hardness that comes, I must get it right. And there's no room.
Expectation that actually often evokes shame if you fail.
There you go. Yes. So play is perfect. Yes. I would just say, make sure you put a time on your playing. I'm sure, Tirza, you did not spend all day playing and learning the funnel.
Not. No, I had other things I had to do.
Correct. But that time, okay, I've got an hour and a half, I've got an hour, I'm going to play in this, I'm going to put to use what I learned, it's going to be fun, I'm going to mess up some stuff, I'm going to learn some stuff, it's going to be good, and then move on, but you'll get to come back to it. And that it gives you the freedom, it removes that uncertainty, which is what fear is.
One time, I was running a forum with about 150 people in a huge conference room. And it was people who their job in the school was to support kids with neurodiversity, autism. And there was a new theory that was coming out in regard to how to engage the neurodiverse brain. I'm not going to get into all the detail. It was quite intense and it was new for all of us. And I'd spent a couple days learning it, researching it, because I was going to present on it. But when I opened up my slides, I said, people, together today, we are going to play through this theory. I am going to present what I've learned in the last 3 days. This is new. You are the experts who do it every day. You don't know this theory, and I'm not in school trying it out. So today in this conference hall, we are going to play through this theory together. I'm not the expert, neither are you, but we're experts in our own knowledge. And I think if we tackle every new thing we learn with that, like I know stuff, I'm confident in what I know, but I also know that I don't know a lot of stuff. So when something new comes in my space, I'm going to be like, okay, it's playtime. Here we go.
Yes.
Let's learn this. And the brain loves it because the brain is actually wired for risk taking. It's the only reason we don't live in caves anymore, and that we have skyscrapers and that we have the computers that we're talking on today is because the brain is wired to play. And unfortunately, the people who are best at playing have always been the ones that never did well in the education world. Most of the people who are the biggest entrepreneurs in regard to inventing things, look, starting from Einstein, going over to Elon Musk, they're the people who were all kicked out of school. Were all kicked out of businesses. But because their brains said, there's a better way. I don't have to use the right words. I don't have to use the right structure that I've been told. I'm going to figure out something else. And they are the ones that don't have fear. They're the ones that will say, hey, let's do it.
Yeah, let's try it. Your example that you gave about doing the presentation and saying, we're going to play through this together. I think that's important for you guys listening to hear. Set your own expectation and play within that sandbox. And the people who are supposed to be in the sandbox with you will come along, and the people who are not won't.
That's right.
Right? I like to say, so I am not yet married, But I say that is it 7, 8 billion people in the world?
Yes.
I only need one. I only need one. So there's a whole lot of possibilities. I only need one. And it's the same. I couldn't even know 8 billion people. I can't even know 8 million people. And so none of us can, well, maybe our minds are big enough to hold that, but to live a fulfilled life where we have close, intimate relationships, we can only have so many people in our lives. And that includes your business, or it includes your work, that everybody is not for you and you're not for everybody. And that's okay.
That's right.
Do what Tirza did. Set your expectation of who you are going to be, verbalize it to people.
So important.
Right? Because then you eliminate your own fear of how people are going to perceive you, because you've already set the expectation of how you are going to present yourself. 100%. So you've given them the perception that they should have. If they decide they don't want to go with it, they're not your people. That's okay.
Right.
8 billion people in the world.
That's right. And my sister told me that about marketing. So my sister is a big marketing manager for a big firm. And she said to me, there's 8-point-something billion people in the world. The only people you need to talk to maybe are 1,000. And out of the 1,000, maybe a couple hundred might buy from you. And that's okay. That's all you're looking for. You know, so find your niche, find your crowd. And you do that by telling your story. You do that by stating, this is who I am. This is what I'm doing. This is what I know. And this is what I want to learn with you. Yes. And it's so powerful. And I think people really connect with those who are authentic and who tell stories and even share their fears or share their lack of knowledge, you know, like, I'm starting this journey, but I'm going to build it with you. And I think people resonate with that, because everybody wants to be respected and everybody wants to feel that their brain has a slice in the world somewhere.
Right. But you have to share what your brain slice is. And you can even set the expectation of how you're going to do things. So let's say you're more of a casual individual, and when it comes to your business, and you set the expectation of, hey, I am laid back, direct, not a whole lot of fluff. That's how I love to work, and that's who I love to work with. If that's you, we're going to be a great fit. If that's not, that's okay. I can recommend somebody for you, or you may find that you fall in love. But that way, you have put yourself out there of how you work, so that you're not, even if you get feedback because there are going to be comments always of people who don't like how you do it, you can still be confident and not have the fear of those comments, because you know that you were honest up front about how you work. So do exactly what Tirza did. Set an expectation up front.
A really important point too is at the beginning of your business or whatever you're trying to communicate to the world, you have a very clear vision and articulate it so clearly. And it needs to be entrenched in you. You know, it has to be so articulated that you know exactly what you're about. And I have to admit, this is a thing for me that has been a big learning curve, and something I'm probably not that good at, because my brain always has so many ideas and I'm so passionate about doing all these things. So then I communicate all of my things to everyone, and then I'm actually talking to nobody. So I need to be more and more refined all the time around which message I'm giving in regard to who I'm talking to. It doesn't mean I can't do lots of things. It just means when I give a message, I don't know, to the public, whether it's social media or in a conference, that I'm focusing on the one aspect of my crazy brain.
Okay, so my question for you, Tirza, is describe in 5 words or less.
Okay.
Yeah. Give me 5 descriptors of the person that you want to help the most and have the expertise to help most. 5 words.
I'm going to have to edit out this pause while I think.
Just a pause.
Just a pause. Knowledgeable, caring, yet ambitious to grow
Give me the last two.
person.
Knowledgeable, ambitious.
Yet ambitious enough, like ambitious in themselves to grow.
Okay.
So, for example, in my leadership consultancy, I work with companies who are doing well and thriving, but maybe they have some stopgaps with individuals who aren't giving their best, and the managers are feeling frustrated. So they're knowledgeable, they're ambitious, their company's growing, but they are driven to grow, and they want to know how to help their team grow further. Okay, so I help them understand the neuroscience of the people that they manage, or the brain, and the people that they're managing who aren't going with them. And their biggest thing is they try and fix that person. And I'm like, no, actually, you need to fix yourself. Because if you want to motivate someone who you're paying to do something for you, they need to also feel a part of that process. They need to be intrinsically motivated. If it's a 9-to-5 job and you're paying their salary and they don't feel motivated, they're just going to do what you pay them for.
Correct. Yeah.
The same with education. So teachers, knowledgeable, ambitious, they want their children to achieve, they want their kids to thrive, but some of them don't, and they feel frustrated. And their first thing that they want to do is bring me in and say, fix that kid. Like, no, it's on you. You have to motivate that brain to learn. You have to motivate that mind to want to be engaged with you. And the same with individuals. When I work with, at the moment, it's women, where we look at where there's a stopgap. You know, what's stopping you from getting the next step that you're desperately wanting? So you're knowledgeable, you're ambitious, yet you need to be motivated to grow. And if you're motivated to grow and achieve, then I can help you, because there's something that's stopping you. Instead of me saying, okay, you have to change in order to motivate that mind, I say to the individual, you have to reprogram your unconscious mind in order to create a new reality for yourself. It's all the same neuroscience, and it's all the same theory. What about you? What would be you in 5 words?
Oh, before I answer, can I ask one more question?
Of course.
Okay. So I understand your group. To get a clearer understanding, I would say, what would they grow to, or what would they grow from? One of the two.
They would grow to, how do I articulate that so specifically? In any of those groups, I believe that they would grow to understand the depth of what empowerment is driven from. Now, that's quite deep. So empowerment for me is one of my most favorite words, and excellence. So if you want, whether it's a kid, whether it's an employee, whether it's yourself, if someone feels empowered, they're going to thrive. If somebody feels that they are part of the journey, they're going to thrive. So the person that I work with is enabled to understand how empowerment happens, how motivation happens, how intrinsic motivation is enacted or perhaps developed. So it's a deep understanding of mind and emotion, and eradicating sort of external pressures or influences, and being deeply intrinsically understanding of what makes us thrive. Am I explaining that well?
Yes, I get it. I would be curious, once you write all that down, and you might already have, the next thing I would be curious about is what they are going to then, how that's going to help them move toward something they want in their lives. That's what I would be curious about, how you would articulate that next. I'm gonna I'm going to have to follow up with you and see
I
what that
think,
sounds like.
and I think I should follow up with myself about that in articulating it.
Yeah.
Because it's interesting, because I've articulated my business, which is basically rewire yours or your employees' unconscious mind in order to evoke a new reality, new action. And that's really deeply understanding how you can plan to teach your brain to do something different in order to change what you're doing. So I guess what they would get out of it is something different. So if you've been wanting to get out of a bad relationship, if you've been wanting your team to bring in more sales or whatever it might be, you've been wanting your student to get that A grade, but you're doing it in the way that doesn't ignite the brain and the dopamine levels and the oxytocin levels to really drive you to want more and to learn more and to grow, then you're failing. So here I'm going to teach you how to do that so that this person can actually become involved.
Okay, that makes complete sense. Okay. The wonderful thing about marketing and the thing that I hate is I am a long-winded writer. So,
yes, I'm the same. I'm so bad at doing this.
Right? And so I could articulate, right? The same for me, just as you did. The marketing says we need to be able to put that in 10 words or less. And I'm like,
yes,
okay.
I know.
Constantly working on that for myself.
Same for me. And I've literally been sitting here doing this click funnel today, trying to do the exact thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So if I had to do 5 words, this is what I get for asking questions. And then a great fellow podcaster would also turn that back on me. Would be stuck individuals wanting, maybe 6, different future reality. But I would say fear
reality, because the future is the new one. Correct.
But I would say this is my problem with alliteration, because I want to put fear and future together because they start with F's. But the reason I say stuck instead of fearful is because tears are so often we don't recognize, go back full circle what we've been talking about today. We don't recognize that fear is what's really the underroot of so many of the things that we struggle with. We name them different things, but it's really, I'm afraid of the what if, or I'm not enough. I don't have that self-efficacy. I don't, my value. And so, because we don't, and we're taught to go back to the word play. We're taught that fear brings shame. I don't know it, so I'm ashamed. I'm not certain, I'm not confident, so I'm ashamed. If I fail, I have shame. And so to call something fear, we've been taught is, it's not good. You shouldn't be afraid of stuff, and fear is bad. And it's just not where we want to live, but it is what it is. And so I would like to put fear in that, but I realized that we wouldn't connect with that. We wouldn't own that and admit I am afraid to say, okay, that is help I need. But if I say I'm stuck, I'm stuck. I'm stuck at the weight that I don't want to be. My business is stuck at this level, or I'm stuck not knowing how to do a funnel. And I need some help, right? So
I put that in today. I was like, do you feel stuck? And then I wrote on myself, I feel stuck on how to do a funnel.
But then you kept playing.
It was great. I was able to watch a YouTube clip and I was able to learn how to do it.
Oh my goodness. You have just done our entire conversation today in exactly what you did. You prepared, you planned, you learned, and then you played.
That's it.
Now you are a little more comfortable in your funnel building, and you'll continue to get even more comfortable as you do it. And that's how we forge through fear.
That is how we forge through fear. That is how we forge through fear. And that's how we can also start to get rid of all of those, like what you were just talking about, where that pressure to not allow fear comes. You're silly if you're scared. And these are all just old statements coming from school, from, like the pressures on school to fail, in school to fail is huge. And I was a teacher for years, and I know it's horrible. Kids are shamed for getting it wrong. The kids who know in the classroom are praised. And I could never understand that. I used to ask the teachers, I was like, but if they know, then why are you teaching it? Why are you spending your day teaching something that more than half the class already knows, and then telling the 3 at the back that they're not good enough for not knowing? I said, school is about coming to a place where you don't know so that you can learn it. So, the whole thing about education to me is like flipped in the wrong way. My little nursery kids would come in and they'd be all scared, like, Mrs. B, I don't know. I'm like, good. That's why you're here. If you knew, then you wouldn't need to come, would you?
Yeah. You get a different perspective.
This mindset of always being the one to get it right, or always being the one to achieve or to know. And then we put this pressure on ourselves, and so many kids commit suicide, or just the awful stuff that happens because they're not good enough, or they don't fit into a box, or because they didn't get the right grade. And of course it varies in different cultures, etc. But like here in Spain, there's hundreds of kids a year who are taking their own lives because they're not getting the right grades, or because they're failing at some task that the teacher gave them. And all I want to shout from the rooftops is, you have till you're 95 to learn it if you want to. You don't have to know it all by the time you leave school at 18. And in fact, I can guarantee you, you will not. And most of the stuff that you learn, you probably are not going to need that information in today's world, unfortunately. And that's a whole other conversation and a different soapbox I can be on. But it's like, just take life as it comes. I would say to my kids when they would be stressed about their grades, like, I don't think I'm going to get a good grade. I'm like, I don't care. You'll probably still get a great life,
Right. Absolutely.
So I think it's so important to just eradicate this pressure that we put on ourselves, is me on my little summary box here. And tell ourselves that we're beautiful and we're strong and we can make mistakes. We can have a growth mindset and embed that in ourselves. And it doesn't matter if one day we're known as a millionaire and the next day we're still learning something new. That's okay. We're still fucking beautiful. Excuse my French.
We go back to, we talked about it, setting the expectation. Set your own expectation. And it does require the deprogramming of what labels you've heard have been tossed at you, you have accepted knowingly or unknowingly. And it takes work. And I think that's one thing I definitely want to leave with everyone. This work takes work. This change takes work.
It really does.
It's a habitual practice. It's a practice, which means you do it over and over. We don't just hear this conversation, make a decision. I'm going to think differently. I'm going to be different. And then it automatically happens. No, It goes back to the affirming that we talked about verbally. Tirza, you just said it, right? Telling yourself. That has to happen every day. There was a time in my life when I was going for a big goal, and I learned the power of affirmations. And I literally recorded. So I wrote my affirmation about myself, spoke it out loud, recorded it, and would literally play it in my car as I was driving.
Amazing. What a great tip. People, do it.
Yeah. And you may think it sounds crazy, but your brain will thank you and your future life will thank you.
It really will. 100%. Yeah, it will.
Yeah.
Because, and there's neuroscience to back that. Because what happens is when we teach our brain this new information, then it enacts it into our body. Our body actually understands this language. And we have to do that. So if you stand in the mirror and you say to yourself, I'm not worth that job that I really want. Actually, what happens is your cognitive brain sees you saying that to yourself and actually says, well, that's a load of hooey. That's not true. And you can realize how ridiculous that depreciating thought is that you've had from your past. And you can take a pin and pop that balloon that's been taking up rental space in your unconscious mind, and then do what you did. Write down a new reaffirmation, say it to yourself, record it, and then play it again and again. And before you know it, it will be so wired in your brain that your body just does it. Your experiences start to make that life happen. It's the same as I used to say to educators who were struggling with kids who had bad behavior. I'd say, tell them they're ugly, and ugly they will be. And let's flip it on its other hand and say, tell them they're beautiful, and beautiful they will be.
Yeah.
If you tell a child every day that he's not achieving, that he's going to be sent out, you're the one that's not correct, he will act that way. It's the same with us.
Yeah.
And I believe that we, especially women, but I think everyone, we're harder on ourselves than we would ever be on anyone else. And I think if we treated other people the way we treat ourselves, we would never have friends.
Oh, that's so true.
I believe. I think we need to give ourselves a good thrashing and say, start loving yourself a little more. Say nice things to yourself. Be empowering to yourself. So this is our takeaway for today. Write your affirmations about your visionary self, what you believe that you're going to be, record it on your phone and play it in your car on your way to work.
There you go.
And we've had a lot of other key points today. So I hope you all have found that conversation empowering. I know I feel energized and empowered. Thank you so much, Kanisha.
Kanisha, you're good. Yeah.
I was there. Kanisha.
Yeah.
For your beautiful, beautiful wisdom and insight and empowering tips and thoughts and statements. I know that our listeners will feel energized by today. And I know I have. So thank you.
Thank you for having me, Teresa. Likewise, right? You shared some definite, I love your science-backed data and processes, because it all goes together, right? The right and the left brain, they go together. And so that was definitely helpful for me. So thank you for sharing that. I know it was for you guys as listeners. And just thank you for, it's always nice to talk to individuals who are aligned with to move forward with confidence and moving fear out of the way so that we have the future that we want, the growth mindset that you talked about, and are ambitiously willing to learn.
Be ambitiously willing to learn, people, and eradicate the fear of not knowing. Be prepared to F up, make mistakes, and figure out a new way to do it. And one thing we will do soon with She Exclusive is have it's something called a fuck up night, where we bring people together and we talk about things that we've had in our life that have been failures, and then how we've overcome them. And we really empower ourselves through both talking about grit and resilience and humility, as well as practical strategies in what we did to get up to the other side of the hill. So if you're interested to be part of it, I'm going to alert everyone I think we'll have it around January, February, an online fuck up night. So that will be beautiful. And we'll talk about eradicating fear, and we'll talk about eradicating shame around doing things that we don't know how to do. And I will share my skills on creating a ClickFunnels.
You'll be proficient by then.
I hope. God hope. Have a wonderful Christmas, and thank you so much for your time. And I've loved it. It's been amazing.
Likewise.
And just to wrap up for our listeners, if you want to be on the podcast or share your superpower and your knowledge with other listeners in our community, please contact me on info@uconnecthub.com, and the link is in the bottom. And also you can sign up to do a podcast on www.uconnecthub.com/podcast, and you can book yourself a slot. Additionally, Kanisha has a podcast, and I'm sure that she would love to connect with other professionals and individuals too. She focuses on those who are uber successful in their business, who are sharing skills with those who are doing startups. So her links will also be in the bio, as well as connection to her podcast. So Stay tuned, get involved, and take care of yourselves, and have a wonderful Christmas.